welcome to DC TechNet, which is your own channel. So do like, share and subscribe to the channel. It will not take more than 2 seconds to click on the subscribe button. So let's see what we have today. Today we'll be looking at the Windows operating system network model, and we will be specifically differentiating between a workgroup model or a workgroup network and a domain network. So first and foremost, what is the purpose of any network? I'm not talking about computer networks over here. I'm talking about any network. So the prime objective of any network is information and resource sharing. This is the prime objective of any network. Even our personal networks, information and resource sharing. For example, we have WhatsApp, Twitter, we have Instagram, Viber, WeChat, Snapchat, and of course we have YouTube as well. So the prime objective is to share information and resources. So the prime objective of computer network is also information and resource sharing. So typically Windows operating system is categorized into two network models or two networks: a workgroup model or a workgroup network and a domain network. So these are the two network models for our Windows operating system. So let us differentiate, or let us see the difference between a workgroup network and a domain network. So please remember one thing, by default any Windows computer can be a member of either a workgroup network or a domain network. We don't have any third choice. So either any Windows computer, let it be a client computer or a server, can be a member of a workgroup network or a domain network. If you look at this picture over here, the computer named Laptop 10 currently is the member of workgroup. So we don't have any other choice, either domain or workgroup. So whenever we build new Windows computer, by default it is a member of workgroup, and afterwards we need to join that computer as a member of Active Directory domain. So let us now differentiate between workgroup network and domain network, and the basis of our differentiation would be on the architecture. So we'll see how is the architecture of a workgroup network and how is the architecture of a domain network. Administration and management. So how we system administrators manage and administer workgroup networks and domain networks. Then login and authentication. So how login and authentication happens in workgroup and domain network. Security, we'll just discuss the security part as well. Implementation, so where to implement which network and why again. And last but not the least, presence of our Active Directory domain services. So these are the points of consideration to differentiate between a workgroup network and a domain network. So let's move on. Architecture. So a workgroup is always a peer-to-peer architecture. Means there is no client-server relationship. Everyone is a peer of each other. So every device is a client and every device is a server. So there is no client-server relation over here in the workgroup environment. Whereas in the domain environment is always a client-server architecture. So some devices are clients and some devices are servers. So the clients requests for services and resources to the servers, and the servers provide these services and resources requested by the client. So this is a client server model, and that is a peer-to-peer model. The next point is administration and management. Workgroup is always decentralized administration and management. Means every device needs to be administered and managed separately. So users in every device needs to be administered and managed separately. As in domain network, everything is centralized. So we can administer and manage all the resources, say users, devices, all the resources from a single window or a single console. And as for example, Active Directory users and computers console. So we can manage all the users and all the computers in our infrastructure because it's a domain network. So the administration and management is centralized. Login and authentication. So a work group is always local login and authentication. So if you create a user on computer A, okay, so that user won't be able to log on to computer B with his or her username and password. So every Windows device maintains local user database, and log on and authentication happens locally. Whereas in say domain network, the log on and authentication is global, it's at the domain level. So there is a centralized database called as Active Directory database, and this database is present on special servers. These servers are called as domain controllers, and this database consists of information related to users and all the devices in our domain, and the users and devices are authenticated against this particular database called as Active Directory database. So there is nothing local over here, everything resides on a domain controller. Security now. So workgroup network is less secured comparatively, because we do not have say much choice of implementing any policies over there, and difficult to say configure access controls as well. Whereas a domain network is comparatively more secured, and we can implement group policies, we can implement role-based access control, RBAC, we can restrict users from accessing resources, we can implement specific configurations for users and computers. So let's move on to the implementation now. So where can we implement a workgroup network and where can we implement a domain network? So workgroup network, so a typical workgroup network should be implemented where resource sharing is more important than security, man. Okay, resource sharing is in every network, but in workgroup network you shouldn't we should implement a workgroup network where resource sharing will have higher precedence over security. For example, cyber cafe. So we are not at all bothered about security in cyber cafe. So if any virus comes in, we will simply format all the machines and again say reconfigure them, because we are least bothered about security over there. Let's talk about where to implement a domain network. A domain network is implemented where security now is more important than resource sharing. So resource sharing is there in all the networks, but in a domain network, security is given more precedence over say resource sharing. So security is more important than resource sharing in a domain network. Example, any business, small or large business, they will never go for a workgroup network. They will go for a domain network. So presence of Active Directory now. Definitely in a workgroup environment, there is no Active Directory at all. And in a domain network, the network becomes a domain network because we bring in Active Directory, man. Because of the presence of Active Directory, that network becomes a domain network. So Active Directory brings in client-server architecture, centralized administration and management, global logon and authentication, and it brings in more security to our network. So hope you have enjoyed today's session. Let's walk you through the summary of what we have seen today. We have seen the difference between a typical workgroup network and a domain network based on architecture, administration and management, logon and authentication, security, implementation, and presence of Active Directory. There are many such points, but I have taken these 6 important points. So if you have any questions, any doubts, feel free to write down a comment. So hope you have enjoyed today's session. Please do like, share and subscribe the channel with your friends and technical community, and enjoy your day.